Back with another episode of the MMA Lockdown Podcast. We're on episode 21, and today I'm going to be chatting with my co-host Donnie about this weekend's past UFC fights at Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. On paper, it was an amazing card. How did you think it played out?
Yeah, I thought it was a cool night of fights. I heard somebody describe it as predictable. I think that's quite right. I think on the whole, most of what people were predicting came to fruition. But despite that, it was great fighters and great contests. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, definitely good to see some championship level fights. Predictable is definitely the right word. I think especially with the main event, Masvidal versus Usman.
Yeah.
He did exactly what anyone would think. And I think Masvidal had some good takedown defense. He got up when he got taken down. I think just his kind of maybe lack of cardiovascular training caught up with him. Getting up from those takedowns and defending those takedowns it takes so much energy. And I think he was trying to save, I think he said this in his post-fight interview, he was trying to save like his flurries and his combinations for times where he felt like he had more energy,
Yeah. Well, I think it was really interesting to see, number one, how disappointed he was in himself post-fight, and that really shows that he believes he could do better. And it's interesting because he didn't do too badly. I mean, he gave a better account of himself than a lot of people have against Usman. That first round, he was hitting him. He could have taken the round. I think he did on one scorecard. Usman seemed a little bit tired, a little bit rattled after that first round. And he goes through the fight, as you say, stuffing a lot of takedowns, getting back to his feet, and not taking too much damage, definitely being controlled. But, he didn't get the Khabib treatment, even in the third, fourth, and fifth round, and he ends the fifth round standing, throwing, not having taken much damage, definitely outpointed, and he didn't obviously deny that, or he took the loss pretty well, Masvidal, but a good account of himself, an account that says, like, I'm one of the best in the division. I'm not just a guy who threw a lucky knee. So, one or two more wins, he could be back in the title fight. He didn't do much to harm the sort of aura that he's got at the moment, in my view. He didn't take a beating. He didn't get finished. But Usman he's a tough guy to beat, and I think that's what both you and I thought going into it, and that's the picture that sticks with us.
Yeah, for sure. No, he's a warrior and didn't do any damage to kind of his popularity or his credit in the UFC. I think a couple more fights for him, maybe one more fight for him, give him a full training camp, and can definitely see him back in title contention soon. I mean, he's a superstar, so the UFC want him, in these big fights.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Colby Covington could be a great fight for him to have an opportunity to show that he can beat a wrestler. There's a lot of like grudge match elements between the two of them as former teammates, like bad vibes. And it's a very, very hard fight. But, if you can beat Colby, you've got a good claim at another shot. There might be bigger fights out there for him. Diaz too. Maybe McGregor. For me, like, it's a good fight for McGregor and Masvidal. He knows that Masvidal will want to stand. It's still a hard fight. Masvidal's a bigger guy. But it's a fight he might take, because I think McGregor, if he was who he says he is, or maybe who he used to be, he'd fight Usman if he's like, I'll fight anyone, because Usman, if McGregor wins, who can doubt the guy's ability ever? If he can go up and beat a monster wrestler, take a third title, that's the hardest thing and the best thing for his fighting legacy, outside of fighting Khabib again, which can't happen for a while. So just on what this all means for McGregor, I think the Masvidal fight is possible. The Usman fight is the fight he should fight if he is the sort of, I want to fight the best all the time and show that I'm the best, but I don't think he does that. And he can do what he wants. He can just say to UFC, I'm not fighting unless it's Usman. but I think we learned something from the fact that he doesn't do that.
Definitely. Well, yeah, McGregor, Masvidal, whoever it is, it will sell huge pay-per-view numbers. And then just to touch briefly on the co-main event, there was quite a lot of controversy with the Volkanovski and Holloway fight.
Yeah.
Obviously, Volkanovski getting the nod from the judges, but it seems like, Dana, the media, and a lot of the fans and a lot of the fighters I saw on Twitter too did not agree at all. It was almost like a landslide disagreement with that outcome. And
Yeah.
what did you think?
Well, you and I agreed on all our predictions except for this fight. So I thought Holloway would probably take it, even though it was a hard one to pick. I just thought, so many people were picking Volkanovski, and those same people will tell you that Holloway is probably the best featherweight ever. And I just thought, here's a guy who's going to make the adjustments that are necessary. And he looked really, really sharp in the first 2 rounds. It was interesting that his response to the leg kicks, which was such a huge factor in the first fight, his main response was to return fire. He wasn't really trying to check leg kicks, but he was just going almost 1-for-1 on the leg kicks in the early rounds. So I think after the 3rd round, Volkanovski had like 22 leg kicks and Holloway had like 16. So he was like, okay, you can kick me in the leg, but I'm going to give you almost 1-for-1. That was pretty interesting response.
Yeah.
I thought I only watched it once, but I thought Holloway took it. Definitely took the first 2. I can't remember which one I thought, but one of the 3rd or 4th I thought really looked like a Holloway round. But it was close. I don't think it was a robbery, but definitely I felt that he had won. But I mean, as someone who picked Volkanovski, where did you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that Max did take the fight. I thought Volkanovski was in it. He showed heart. He was always coming forward. He was putting pressure. No time in the fight did I feel like Alex was like withering and stepping down and losing energy and the fight getting taken out of him. I thought he was in Max's face. He showed he had the gas tank, but I did think Max kind of outclassed him on the feet and did I think he dropped him twice. So yeah, I also thought Max had it. So now it's an interesting situation because you have 2-0 to Volkanovski, and the second fight was a clear victory to Max in the eyes of the majority of the fans of the UFC. So what does the UFC do next now?
Yeah,
it's a tough one, and there's a lot of great fights to make at that weight class. So it's a bitter pill for Max to swallow, but he seems pretty upbeat from his interviews and social media posts, and it's just the reffing, and the judging. It's like I don't know if you saw the post this weekend with the Submission Underground fight with Craig Jones, and the ref called a tap when he didn't tap. And you have so many of these bad ref and judging decisions that actually they can really change an athlete's career. I saw Gordon Ryan was saying this decision for Craig Jones can cost him super fights, because now he's not like on this winning streak, advertising money or sponsorship money. But how you get around it, I don't know. I think you got to put judges in there that are ex-fighters.
Yeah, and I think with the reffing, especially, we'll probably talk about it again with the Aldo Jan fight. But like the what happened with Craig Jones was crazy, because there's no tap. And what kind of referee who understands jiu-jitsu, as presumably all referees do, calls a premature tap in a high-level jiu-jitsu match? Like let the guy clearly show you that he's tapping. I mean, that didn't even look like a tap.
He's ridiculous.
And I mean, I'm not sure, but I think it was an EBI rules overtime. So even if it wasn't, if a guy's on your back with his hooks in, the referee must understand there's a strong choke possibility, but has then got to be awake and alive enough to recognize that there's no choke and there's definitely no tap.
You don't really see refs in jiu-jitsu coming in to protect fighters like you do in MMA, because you're not getting struck. So it's like, clearly Craig Jones wasn't passed out. I can see, okay, you get him in a choke and he passes out, then you come in and separate. But he clearly wasn't passed out. He had the, back control. And if he needed to shout tap because he felt like he couldn't tap, he would have done it. It was just weird. Like he
Yeah.
stepped in, called the tap, and
I
anyway.
almost feel like if that happens, they should be able to immediately review the video in a jits match and go straight back to the same position in the same time. You know, even if the position is like this neck crank that he had, and you know, just go back. You know, you can. So, and that's what you should do then. But yeah, I mean, on the judging, you know, Luke Thomas was saying, and we've had this discussion before about how should you judge fights. You know, is it right that you weight every round the same? Should you weight things differently if someone's dominating at the end of a fight? And you know, like, let's say there was 2 rounds Volkanovski, 2 rounds Holloway, and 1 round that could have gone either way. But the 2 rounds that were Holloway was dominating those quite significantly, but not enough for a 10-8, which he kind of was. You know, he dropped him in each of those first 2 rounds. You know, I think that's part of the sense that the fight ends and Holloway has looked the better fighter. But on this technical 10-9 system, it's fair to say Volkanovski won.
Yeah.
Tough one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And just to go back to my comment where I said, you know, we need fighters or ex-fighters to be judges, not necessarily ex-fighters, even like coaches or people that have been practicing martial arts for a long time who knows what it's like to be in a choke or in an arm bar, or, you know, to get punched in the face. And I mean, I think we remember that one UFC where one of the judges was asking, what is this position? When there was a grappling exchange. So, I mean, that is just so far off the scale of like knowledge.
Yes.
You should not be judging a fight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how the sport's come this far without like having some sort of guidelines for that. You either have to have competed in some stand-up competition and at least have your blue belts in jits, or, you know, black belt in karate and wrestled in high school, like show some sort of qualification, or have some course that you've got to pass where you get asked in the course if you know what a kimura looks like, rather than having to turn to your co-judge and say, what's going on here, you know?
Yeah, no, it's weird that like, maybe it's because it's a commission thing and not a UFC thing but you think that the UFC would have influence over these type of situations, but who knows? And anyway, Don, let's move on. And then the other fight was Peter Yan and Jose Aldo. And we both picked Yan, and that was the outcome. But I must say that I thought that Aldo looked really good. I didn't expect him to look as good as he did and to hold, you know, his own and, control the octagon and look aggressive. But ultimately, he kind of, I think, fatigued quite a lot and then got caught and then just couldn't recover. And then another terrible ref stoppage. I mean, sorry, I'm just going to jump straight into that. I mean, it really pissed me off how the ref kept on saying, fight back, fight back. How is he supposed to fight back? He's getting his head like basically smashed in and he's fatigued. And what do you want him to do? He can't fight back. That's when you've got to step in and protect him and stop the fight. Don't tell him to fight back. He can't fight.
It was horrible, man. And like, he was like lying in this growing pool of his own blood, or turtled up. He was kind of turtled up, and this pool of his own blood just like growing and expanding. And you just think you're like watching someone take like real head trauma that they shouldn't have to take. And I listened to the Rogan Fight Companion, and I was walking and listening to it, and from the point that they start saying, like Rogan and Joey Diaz, whoever else is with them, start saying like stop the fight, until the point that the fight is stopped, it must be like 40 seconds of like just unnecessary damage. And then someone said, I think the other guy that was with him said, like, you're punishing the fighter for not getting knocked out. You're like, because you've got the chin to like not actually be flat out, I'm just going to let you take this damage. The fighter could tap. He could tap to strikes, but a lot of fighters don't want to do it. Yeah.
No. They need the ref to step in to save themselves from themselves.
You know what I was thinking? Like Dominic Cruz, imagine if he was commentating on that fight. Like imagine what it would have been like for him to watch that fight when that fight was for the title that he fought for against Cejudo. Yeah. And he got stopped when he was like completely still there. And then he's watching another referee in the same stakes, the same title on the line, is just like allowing Aldo to just take all this unnecessary
Yeah,
damage. And
that's a great point.
thinking like, what the hell? Like, how am I supposed to know what's going to happen? You know?
Yeah. Crazy. I mean, yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, he was going in for a single leg. He looked pretty fresh. Yes, he was rattled, but yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. They need to. I don't know if anyone sits down with these refs afterwards or judges and analyzes their performance and and say, did you see what you did? Did you understand that why that everyone's saying that's a terrible stoppage?
Yeah, it's so rough, man. But yeah,
Yeah.
I thought, like you said, Aldo looked really good. Um, I think Bisping was saying it was like a Muay Thai fight. Those guys are just standing in front of each other, like shellacking each other with kicks. And um, yeah, Aldo kind of reintroduced the leg kicks.
Mm-hmm.
And people have been wondering why he hasn't been throwing them so much when it's been such a big part of his career. And they were having an impact for sure. But I think, as you said when we did the preview, like Jan is just such like monster of a fighter, and he just seemed to like wear so little damage. Just keep up the pace, keep up the pace, keep up the pace, and it was kind of just a question of who was going to wilt, and it was
Yeah.
like youth versus age, but the same as Masvidal in the Usman fight and Holloway in his fight, like Aldo did himself like no disservice. Like he looked like one of the best in the world still, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and that's what I was happy to see because I was worried, it could go the other way, kind of like one of those BJ Penn moments.
Yeah.
And then Don, before we wrap up the review, do you want to give us your thoughts on the Rose and Andrade fight?
Yeah, I thought I was stoked that Rose won. As you know, I was hoping she would win because I thought that as someone who beat Joanna twice, she would be the best person to fight Wei Li.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it looked quite similar. It followed a similar pattern in a way to the first fight. She was dominant the first 2 rounds. It's just like a better
Mm-hmm.
fighter, I think, than Andrade. But Andrade, the same way she's just got that raw power to drop Rose on her head. In the third round, she showed just that raw power and determination. And Rose turned out like, a fourth and fifth round would have been tough because Andrade was hitting her and Rose was really wearing it. Her nose was cut up, her eye was blackened. So it was a big third round for Andrade. It was her round.
Yeah.
And again, if fights were scored in as a whole, Rose got beat up in that fight, but because they're not scored like that, she clearly won 2 out of 3 rounds. So
Right.
it's her fight, and should, in my mind, should be her challenging for the title next. But it was still good to see that she looked really sharp. Her striking is just so high level, and that's what's going to make the Wei Li fight really interesting.
Yeah.
But she'll be thinking about working on her defense, because if Andrade can tag you, Wei Li can tag you.
Definitely. That's a fantastic fight, and I think it's the fight to make. And then, Don, just before we wrap up for the podcast, I thought it would be interesting to touch on, we both watched the Hannah Gracie video that he put out today, which I can link in the bio or link below the video, is talking about a lot of the jiu-jitsu moves such as knee on belly, mount, that are often used by the police to subdue a person, or whatever. I don't want to say a criminal because they're not necessarily criminal, but just a person in an arrest are now being outlawed and actually criminalized to use. And his video was basically saying this is a really terrible idea because now it leaves the police only more lethal forms of kind of resistance or subduing a person, versus using something like we understand as the mount or knee on belly. So yeah, I think jiu-jitsu is what policing needs, because that will stop the police using excessive force, like with whatever, it's a taser or baton or having to punch or slam. And here they are kind of taking that away. So his video was kind of appealing to the governor, I think, of New York to not do this.
Yeah, so the law's apparently been adopted in New York, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of these unfortunate things that happens when you've got like a movement that's important and points out a real problem, and then people come up with solutions that like look good as a headline, but they actually don't make sense. So obviously a knee on belly or a mount is an important way of subduing someone without hurting them. You know, and the best example, or a very good example that was sort of in the media, was when former UFC champion and Renzo Gracie black belt Matt Serra subdued like a drunk idiot in a restaurant. And you can see that on YouTube. And he just mounts him, controls him, not hurting him. He just says, "Calm down, buddy, calm down." And then a security guard comes and says, "Okay, I'll take it from here." And Matt actually says to him, like, "Do you know, like, are you ready to control him when I let him go?" Like, you know, because the security guys and definitely cops should be trained in how to control people without doing damage to them. And the mistake that's been made, at least in New York, and let's hope not elsewhere, is you take a knee on a head, which is incredibly dangerous, and obviously for 8 minutes is like batshit crazy and looks like murder to me. And you equate that with a mount position, which is a control position that won't hurt someone or shouldn't hurt someone. So it's really not good. And I think Hannah makes a good point that you've said. You know, if you can't mount someone, how do you control them? Well, I don't know. Like, you try punch them, you try elbow them, it's terrible, you know? So, you know, certainly ban like something like a knee on a neck. It's crazy, you know? But teach people effective martial arts like Jiu Jitsu, how to control people without hurting them, how to diffuse situations, because obviously cops do have to deal with real situations where they do have to subdue people. That doesn't mean that they don't often overreact or subdue people who they shouldn't be subduing. And obviously we've seen some of that in the most terrible ways. But this seems like a bad solution in New York.
Yeah, I mean, as he says, the problem here is the decisions are being made by people basically who are suits in a sense. They've never been, you know, a police officer. They've never been in a fight. They don't know what it's like to be in a real confrontation. And I think like when a decision like this is made, you should definitely be consulting, you know, the police and, you know, various parties without just, you know, handing down this type of law. I mean, I've watched a lot of videos, and Hannah posts a lot of videos on his Instagram about interactions with the police and scuffles. And you could see if just that police officer had 6 months of jiu-jitsu training, what a different outcome that would have had. You know, let alone a police officer who's a purple, brown, or black belt being in a confrontation.
Yes.
So like taking away jiu-jitsu from the police and jiu-jitsu moves and controls and holds is just, as you know, it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. You know, the best thing you can do is teach teach police how without arms, you know, in an unarmed setting, to just use their body to control people without hurting them.
Definitely.
And it's not easy, but it's good. You know, it's good for people to be equipped with that. And you know, if you understand the mount and you understand side control and knee on belly and how to just control, subdue someone, you also understand why you can't put your knee into someone's neck. You know, not to say that if the guy who did it to George Floyd had understood that, he wouldn't have done that. He might just be like a terrible person who should be in prison. But let other cops understand why they mustn't put their knee on someone's neck, you know, if they're stupid enough not to understand that to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, when we're rolling, we all understand what is kind of allowed and what is dangerous and what is not dangerous, and you know, stuff like that. We're never gonna like transition in a kind of in the training room with like our shin or our knee on your neck or on your jaw to another position, because that's just not done, you know. And I think you need to give police officers a little bit more kind of discretion and tools to do their job properly, because it's going to create a lot of issues now. Because what do? As you say, how do you subdue someone? How do you arrest someone that's trying to get away from you or attacking you? Like, it's almost making it a very, but it's also a very political thing. But I did want to say one thing that I heard, which also relates to this, in an interview with John Danaher recently that he did on, I think, London Real TV, when he was a bouncer. He said before he knew jiu-jitsu, basically the only way the bouncers could control the situation or control people is to punch them and knock them out.
Right.
Then he said when he learned jiu-jitsu, he actually was able to, like, say, rear naked someone, put them out, and they would actually come back, a few weeks later and say, like, thanks for not knocking me out, and just,
Yeah.
so, there you go. It's another way, to look at it. You don't have, it may look quite aggressive, but it's way better than being punched in the face or being hit with a baton.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, yeah, it's strange to me that there's so many people training now more than ever. It's not new to teach jiu-jitsu to people in authority. It's
Yeah.
been happening for decades, even before there was Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu. And I just think it's strange, especially in a place like New York, that they wouldn't apply their minds to what actually will make things safer.
Yeah, I agree.
For people, not, for citizens who are being subdued, whether they're being subdued and they shouldn't be, and then they sue for wrongful arrest, or they're being subdued and they should be, but they still shouldn't be hurt,
100%. No, I totally agree. Well, hopefully it doesn't play out in other states and they can kind of see through this decision and overturn it.
Yeah, and I mean in South Africa, where like the cops really, unfortunately, are not well equipped to deal with violence. The introduction of good martial arts training there would be just such a good thing.
Yeah, amazing. I think everywhere, every police force. Anyway, Don, we got to wrap it up. It was a great chat. Some more UFC coming up this Wednesday, which we'll check out. And until the next one, thanks to our listeners.
Jazz.
Yeah, it says it's still recording on my